Hey everyone, Mr. Sugg coming at you with a video about the AP Classroom Unit 7 progress check free response question. This is about array lists. It's not too bad. Kind of once you understand like what you need to do, it's actually gettable. So remember, array lists are basically similar to arrays, except that you can add, remove, and set and kind of modify that list of whatever you have. Um, and so keeping that in mind, we're going to take a look at this. Remember, our friends at the College Board, when they put down code, they do everything for a reason. So there might be things that you use, and most of the times you're going to end up using them. So basically we have this username class. Okay, so that's kind of important. So let me just highlight it um, right there. The list of possible usernames spanned based on a user's first and last names, blah, blah, blah. So basically the username, what it's going to do, it's going to take into account someone's first and last name. So then when we take a look at this, the first thing we need to see is that there is this array list already created that is pointing to the string class called possible names, right? So we're probably going to have to do something with that. And then furthermore, we have another is a constructor called username that's going to take in someone's first name and last name. And then we need to do something that's in part A. So I'm kind of looking through the code and seeing what's going on. This is used method that's going to be used in part B that you'll see in a little bit. And we'll write the void set available usernames, taking used names. So that's in part B. So again, I'm just kind of looking through the code, just making sure I highlight, hey, what are some important constructors, methods, anything that we have on here. Now I'm going to go to part A, and basically what they're trying to do is they're trying to say, hey, write the constructor for the username class where it's going to take and fill in those possible names with possible usernames based on their first name and last name. Pay attention to this example. They're telling you, hey, we're going to declare this username or this person, right, in the username class, and the name, first name John, last name Smith. And what they're saying is after the code is executed, they need to add the following to the list. And you'll notice that the last name is always coming in first. And then the first name, there's four of them here, right? So it's inserting the first name, or sorry, the first letter for J, the second letter for the O, three letters JOH, and then finally John. So those are four names that are going to be added to the list. So in my head at this point, I'm thinking, you know what? Like I really see a for loop coming because I need to do something to go through, like basically keep adding something to the array list. So let's get started here. So keeping all of that in mind and kind of looking at the code, the first thing I need to do is I understand that we're going to go ahead and let me put a little bit lower. We're going to go ahead and write in what it is that we're going to look at. So first things first is we have this array list, right? String that was created earlier, but we have nowhere to basically put these possible names. Okay, so again, we're trying to initialize and fill this possible names array list. So let's go ahead and do that first. So I'm going to go ahead and write in possible names, just like they put it in the FRQ. And then we're going to go ahead and make it equal to the new array list. And we have to use these alligator signs, right? The inequality is essentially for string. Now, in case you're wondering, Souther, what are you doing? It tells us right there to initialize the possible names array list, right? And you might be wondering, why are we using string? Well, because we're taking in string for the first name and last name, right? So these are string objects that we're going to throw into possible names. All right, that's the first part. As I mentioned before, we're probably going to need to use a for loop, so I'm going to go ahead and write one in because I want to be able to add to my array list, right? So without a for loop, I cannot necessarily traverse through the array, or sorry, traverse through or add to the array list over and over, because for one name, you'll see for John Smith, I added four of them. So I'm going to need something that's going to be iterative. Okay, so we're going to do int index equals 0, index is less than, and I want to do first name dot length. Okay, so we're going to keep running this for loop. The idea here is, depending on the name of the first name, remember, I'm going to add one letter, then two letters, then three letters, and keep adding those first few letters until I get to the end of the first name. Last name is locked in, so we're going to run this for loop for the length of the first name. And just as a reminder, we're using the parentheses here, right? Because dot length is a method that's built into that God tier string class. So that's already done for us. It is a method. If we're talking about an array length, then there would be no parentheses. Kind of tricky, but something you have to remember. All right. So I'm going to take my possible names, that list I just created, and we're going to go ahead and use the add method, which is in your quick reference for the Java sheet. And here we're going to go ahead and start with the last name, right? I'm just looking at what I highlighted up here, right? Smith J. And then we're going to go ahead and concatenate with, let's see, the first name. And remember, we're using a for loop for a reason because I want to take the substring of the first letter. So normally I would do 0, 1, right? And I would grab that first letter. But remember, this is going to keep adding the index values. So I want to keep going with index plus 1. So in the first iteration, it's going to go from 0 to 1, so to get that first letter. The second iteration is going to go from 0 to 2, so to grab the first 2 letters, right? Because it's not including this last number here. Okay, so once I do that, now I'm all set with this one. So close out the for loop. I'll close out the constructor, right? I guess I'll include a curly brace there. And then we're done with that. All right, next one. Now what we're going to do is they want us basically, so if there are any names that are already taken, we want to basically remove them from our array list. So again, you can read this too, it says the method removes from possible names, that's that array list we just created, all names that are found in used names. So I need to do something with used names, which is the parameter here. And we're going to go ahead and compare, right, whether or not used names is in possible names. To make this a little bit easier, they actually created a helper method called isUsed, and that's a Boolean. So it's going to return true if an exact match is found, and then false otherwise. Okay, so if we have an exact match, that means that username is being used, so I want to go ahead and remove it. If it's false, then that means we can go ahead and not remove it, right? Okay. So now knowing that we need to, again, use possible names, right? And we're going to go ahead and we need to use isUsed as the helper method in order to receive full credit, as it says in that last sentence. I need to make sure that, let's go ahead and start. For some reason, they're not including the curly brace, so I like to just put that in there. And then what I'm going to do is I basically need to take in the used names. And remember, we're going to have to go through my array list I just created and check to see whether or not those names are taken off the board. So again, just to recap, part A just takes in a person's first and last name and makes all the possible usernames out of that. Part B is going to then check what I made in part A and check it against the array that's already created that houses all of the usernames to see if there's any matches. If there's any matches, that means they're taken, so they're going to remove it. So first thing I'm going to do is bust out a for loop, right? And then let's go ahead and write it. And then in this case, I want to make sure that I don't, that I'm going to look at my array list called possible names, right? So I need to make sure that index value the for loop is going to keep running until I get to the end of that array list. The end of the array list, or the length, is going to be given by the dot size. And again, this is in your Java quick reference guide. So be sure to keep that handy with you just to check. If you've memorized already, great. But I like to make sure I have it for reference. Okay, so we made a for loop. So in this case, we need to use the isUsed method. That is going to return true or false, right? So if it is actually true, so I'm going to just kind of write my pseudocode. So if used is true, basically, I'll update this in a second. Then what I wanted to do is I wanted to go to possible names, right? Which is the array list. And we're going to use the remove method, which is also in that quick reference guide. And we're going to remove it at that index value that I'm looking at because I'm in the for loop, right? Now, one thing I'm going to say too is one thing I get nervous about is when we use the remove, okay, in this case, we're going one by one until we find it. My concern is that we're going to go ahead and find something that's at the, we're going to remove and have a problem here, right? Because everything's going to shift to the left once I remove an element from the array list. So I'm going to go ahead and set index equal to the actual size of my my array list. And I'm going to go ahead and make sure we run index so that keeps running till I get to the front, right? It's going to keep running till I front. And then I'd like to do the decrement. So again, I'm changing it. So I'm trying to go from the back of the bus to the front of the bus, right? So we're going to set index value equal to the length or the size of my array list, right? So if it's got 8 elements, we're going to start with 8. I should probably take away 1 there. right? Because we start counting from 0, so the end of my array list size would be 8 minus 1, which is 7. So again, if there's 8 elements, that means the index value at the very end is 7. So that's where we're going to start. And then we're going to go ahead and keep running this thing till we hit 0, right? So once we hit 0, that's the last time we're going to do the for loop and then be done. And the index minus is going to do the decrement. So I'm trying to see like if, and the reason I did that, just so you know, to change it is I'm using the remove method and I get nervous about missing a certain element, right? And it's totally okay to move from the back. Okay, so then I'm going to go ahead and remove any values that match the is used, okay? And then is there anything else I need to do? It's a public void, so I don't need to actually return anything, right? So I'm going to go ahead and close out that if loop, or the ifs conditional, and then close out the for loop, and then close out the actual method. Now at this point, we need to go back to the if statement because right now I just wrote down some pseudocode saying is used equals true, but there's more to it. I want to use the is used method and I need to look at, remember, so we're in the for loop. I want to check each element of possible names, right? And in order to, again, we're really hitting the quick reference guide hard. There is also a get in your quick reference guide that says get int index for the array list class, and it returns the element at position index in the list. So in other words, I want to get that value at the index. If I don't use the dot get, you will not be able to fill in that element with the value that it has. So if one of the usernames says Smith J, and that's what I want to use, but it's being taken, I need to go get that value, specifically tell it to do that. And then we can go ahead and look at is used one more time. I'm just going to check the parameter, which is up here. There it is. So I saw is used takes in the string name, and then it's going to look at whatever the array list or the array is where those used items are housed. And it also says somewhere in the code, maybe I missed it, where it's going to look at the used names. Okay, so again, the parameters are, first thing I'm going to do is find the value or the name, right? And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put in the used names array because that's the second parameter that it needs. So there's my argument, and then close that out. Let me just check. So I ran a for loop where it's going to go back from the end of the array list, keep going until we hit beyond 0, do a decrement every time I do the for loop, check to see whether or not is used is true or not. Is used is a Boolean method that takes in the name, right, or that value, and then compares and takes in the array called used names, and that's going to look through that array that's already been built. And then if that is true, then we're going to go ahead and go to my array list and remove whatever index value we're at. Otherwise, I don't need it to do anything, right? So we're going to go ahead and leave it as that. And that is it.